what a lot of people don't understand before they launch their first campaign is that if you try and sell your product or market your product to your normal target market and then send them through to Kickstarter, if that target market doesn't understand what Kickstarter is or hasn't heard what Kickstarter is, you've not only got to sell them on your product, you've got to sell them on Kickstarter first.
This is the Ideas Lab podcast, where you can learn from great creative and entrepreneurial minds how to turn your ideas into original businesses, books, and brands. Because in a crowded world, it pays to stand out. This is your host, John Williams, best-selling author and founder of the Ideas Lab London. Crowdfunding is a wonderful thing when it works. It has the potential to launch your new product with a flood of pre-orders that gives you vital cash you need to deliver on what you're making. However, 70% of crowdfunding campaigns fail to reach their target. So I'm glad to be able to talk to Will Dooley, founder of CrowdReach, who has helped run over 200 successful campaigns on Kickstarter and Indiegogo with over $25 million raised. We talk about how Will and his co-founder were on a very unconventional degree program in Bristol when they first had the idea for CrowdReach. And we go into the do's and don'ts of successful crowdfunding. Hi, Will. Thanks for making time to join us on the podcast.
No problem. Glad to be here.
I've been hearing all about what CrowdReach does, and you've run over 200 successful campaigns on Kickstarter, I believe. So we'd love to talk about that, but why don't we start with where you started CrowdReach? So you're somebody who never actually had a job, is that right? You never had a proper job?
No, I've never been to a job interview or anything like that.
Lucky person.
Started CrowdReach whilst I was at university, and then managed to turn it into a full-time job by the time we left. Well, a few months after we left. We spent a few months sleeping in one room on sofas together, trying to get enough money together. But once we'd managed that, we went straight into it out of uni.
Wow. And so you said you were on some kind of course when you had the idea, or did you have the idea before you got on this course?
No. So whilst we were on the course, it was basically a new degree that hadn't been run in the UK before, called Team Entrepreneurship. There's no exams, no lectures, no timetable. You're basically given free rein to start a company of some sort or start a business related project. And then you write about your experiences during that project and you relate it back to the theories that the normal business management students would be learning on their normal degrees.
So I love the sound of this team entrepreneurship thing. You actually come out with a degree at the end, but without doing exams.
A degree that I've never used, but yeah. And hopefully never will have to use. Yeah,
true. But I think that sounds fantastic. And what did you, when you went into this thing, did you have an idea for a business or not?
No. So I came to Bristol originally, where I did the course to do engineering, and I failed miserably at engineering, and just decided to do some window shopping. Whilst I was meant to be revising for some resits in second year, I started window shopping on the clearing page and found this course that said it had no exams and no lectures, which sounded amazing. So I kind of ended up on the degree by accident. Didn't really know what it was until a few months in, and it sort of started to come through and resonate with me that actually this was a pretty awesome course that we were doing. And then the actual business came out of some other students that we met whilst we were in the cafeteria at uni. They were talking near one of our friends about a 3D printing product that they'd made, and they were talking about how they were going to market it. And he got chatting to them, and from that ended up with us running our first ever Kickstarter campaign for their product, which was, I think it raised about 3 times its original target, which for a first campaign, and considering we, weren't exactly experts in crowdfunding at that point, it was quite impressive.
So, I mean, you're experts in crowdfunding now, but back then, what were you using to go on? Were you just Googling things furiously, or did you have some knowledge of marketing already?
No, we had some knowledge of marketing within the team that we had for that project. And And there was an element of luck in it. I mean, as with a lot of these things, when you first start out, I think there is an element of luck. We got quite lucky with a forum that we were using. There's quite prolific sort of 3D printing forums around the web. Quite involved in those forums, made quite good connections as the brand within those forums. And that was what essentially made that campaign successful.
So then you set up a business, which is CrowdReach, to help other people to run crowdfunding campaigns. Did you see the need already? Obviously, you'd had that one example with somebody you've been helping out. I mean, was it clear to you that there was a demand for this?
I mean, not straight away, but we knew the stats that were on Kickstarter at the time. So it hasn't really changed much to today either. It's about 70% of campaigns that launch on Kickstarter fail. So there was an obvious market for it. It was more a case of, okay, how do we tap into this market was what we tried to work out after that campaign. Initially, we made the mistake of trying to stick in the southwest of the UK. And then after a couple more campaigns where we were quite limited in our options of who we could work with, we then started moving more out internationally and trying to find ways that we could deliver our services without actually having to meet the clients and without necessarily having to see the product in person, and became much more kind of remote in that way.
Yeah. So now you've run all these campaigns. What have you seen? So with 70% of them failing, the ones who don't have your help, that we should say, what have you noticed about the ones that do succeed and the ones that don't? What are the determining factors? If you even though there's a big range of products, what's the commonality in the winners and losers?
So, I mean, as with most things in life, if you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. It's the same with crowdfunding. But one of the biggest elements of crowdfunding is just not understanding how your customer is going to perceive the product when it's on Kickstarter. So whilst there are a lot of similarities between selling a product on Kickstarter compared to selling on e-commerce, for example, there's different ways you go about it. So you would have a sales funnel for Kickstarter in the same way that you have a sales funnel for e-commerce, but the process that you use and the stages in that funnel are very different. And having an understanding of how the person is going to perceive things like your product and your pricing, what imagery and messaging they're is going to catch their attention best, which features and USPs they're most interested in, and what kind of questions they're going to ask when the campaign goes live, all affect the different stages of your funnel in Kickstarter. As you go through it all, you can little increases in your click-through rate on any adverts you run. Then you can then improve a section on your landing page so you get a better conversion rate from it. That you can then improve your email open rates and your email click-through rates. That information that you build prior to even starting your pre-launch, the pre-launch of your campaign, can affect so many stages of your sales funnel when it comes up to the launch of the campaign. You don't realize how much of a difference it makes when you actually launch the campaign. If you add 1% to each stage of that funnel in the run up to launch, when you actually do launch and you send out a big mass email to everyone that you've collected and you go through all your social media and things like that, when you send that out, if you've prepped right and you understand what people are looking for by that stage and you've improved every stage of your process, you get significantly more sales at launch. And sales at launch equals more organic traffic from Kickstarter, because Kickstarter, much like Google, has an algorithm running behind it, which prioritizes the campaigns that are funding the fastest, the campaigns that have raised the most. So you do generate a significantly greater amount of organic traffic from Kickstarter by having that stronger launch. And then once you've done that, having more social proof on the campaign from having more sales ultimately then results in better results from your live campaign marketing, because Kickstarter is all about trust ultimately. If people don't trust your company and they don't trust that they're ever going to get the product, then you're never going to succeed, because you're battling to sell them not only on the product but on you. Whereas if you've already got a campaign with a load of backers that came in the first few days because you were pre-selling to them, you'd created that connection with them prior to launch, it then makes those people that you bring to the campaign once it's live that you don't necessarily have as much of a sales funnel with, it's much easier for them to back the campaign, because they look at it and they go, oh, well, 1,000 people have already done due diligence on this campaign. They've already checked out the product. They've already, it just makes it a lot easier for those people to commit to the project if you've already got that existing success there, which enables you to keep going. Whereas a lot of Kickstarter campaigns, that's a good start and then they plateau out and they never grow again. They kind of get that flat spot in the middle of the campaign and it just doesn't really go anywhere from there.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. So but there's a lot you've said there. And I think, first of all, I think that pipeline thing is really interesting for sales funnel as you described it. So for people who don't think like this, it's quite important. It's kind of thing I cover in some of my courses where if you run an advert, only a certain percentage of people will click through it. And then when they click through, only a certain percentage of people will opt in. For instance, if you're giving away something free or giving away information or something, only a certain percentage will then give their email address to get that. And then you're going to send them an email and possibly promote your product or something. Only a certain percentage of people will click through to the product page. And then only a certain percentage of those people will actually buy. And if you take all those sort of, if you end up with, 10% of 1% of 2% of whatever, you begin to realize why you have to spend a lot of money on adverts before you actually get a sale. And if those numbers don't work, then you spend more on ads than you make out of a product. So what you're saying is, so this is part of what CrowdReach does. You go through and do you work on all of those different elements of a sales funnel, or do you not cover all of that?
Yeah. So when it comes to pre-launch, we're primarily a Facebook ad agency. So one of the first steps that we do with our clients is we will build a small, almost focus group to use, basically to learn what those people are most interested in about the product and find out all that information that we can then use to improve each step of that process. We pass all that information on to the client. We also use it when we then run ads for the client as well. But our primary services are, building email lists for pre-launch and then running live ads on the campaign.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. So you actually help people build that initial email list. And I spoke recently to Laura Sagan, who turned her grandmother's recipe for a hair mask that makes your hair grow faster into a commercial product called the Hair Fuel. And a lot of people report that those early sales are very important. And what she did was she documented the whole process of her creating this product and launching it in order that at the point she said, hey, you can buy it now, everyone already knew what it was and why she was doing it and so on, rather than suddenly popping up and going, there's a product for sale. Do you want to buy my thing? And people go, what? You're doing a product? What is this thing? So it sounds like you're doing that in a very systematized way. So that sounds like a great idea. And you also do validation of, is that what, part of that, I guess, is a kind of validation. So part of what you do is do you validate people's ideas before they even launch?
Yeah. So part of that initial process of creating the focus group and talking to the focus group, we're basically pulling the information that we can collect or anything interesting that happens when we're running the Facebook ads, and pulling it with survey data from the people that we collect into a small focus group before they even start doing pre-launch or anything like that. We can combine that information together to generate a lot of information that's really useful for them. We can determine whether the product is suitable for Kickstarter from that. We can highlight any unforeseen difficulties the campaign might face, or if there's like barriers that are preventing backers from potentially purchasing on the campaign, things that they need to edit. You can also find out all sorts of information about, the imagery, messaging, USPs, features of the product that people are most interested in, which is what I was talking about earlier. You understand a lot more about the product. So for some clients, it validates it for them and says, yes, you've got a really good product here, but you maybe need to tweak this and that to make sure that you're actually pulling the best sales out of this. For other products, it comes back and we have to say, well, you know what? We got some really good responses from some more generic Facebook audiences, but from some more Kickstarter focused audiences, the response wasn't as good, or the response was much more expensive, which implies that potentially the Kickstarter market doesn't necessarily overlap with this product's target market as much as we thought, which isn't necessarily the end of the world for a campaign, but it does obviously make it a lot harder and usually more expensive to run a Kickstarter campaign.
So what are you saying, that people who use Kickstarter are a certain kind of person that's different from somebody who just goes to Amazon?
Yeah, definitely. There is a a very specific demographic that uses Kickstarter.
And what is it? Presumably it's early adopters, is it?
Yeah, early adopters. So it's, as a general demographic, it tends to be 35-year-old men.
Oh wow.
who are interested in tech. That kind of ballpark.
Yeah.
That's kind of the peak demographic. But there's definitely a certain type of person. I think what a lot of people don't understand before they launch their first campaign is that if you try and sell your product or market your product to your normal target market and then send them through to Kickstarter, if that target market doesn't understand what Kickstarter is or hasn't heard what Kickstarter is, you've not only got to sell them on your product, you've got to sell them on Kickstarter first, which means that you just don't generate on the spot sales. It's near enough impossible. So if you're going to do that, or if you find out that your target market doesn't necessarily overlap with Kickstarter's demographic that much, you need to focus a lot more on pre-launch marketing, because you need to make sure you've got that time to not only sell them on you and the product, but also sell them on using Kickstarter as a way for helping you to get to that stage that you need to get to.
So what are some of your most successful campaigns? I know you worked on Betterback, and I actually bought that product, which is really interesting. It's a thing for improving your posture when you're sitting down. Was that one of your best ones, or have you got ones that are even bigger than that?
Yeah. Betterback was one of the biggest ones we've done. I think they did about $1.2 million by the end. Yeah. Did you buy yours through a Facebook ad?
I know I did get it off Kickstarter, but I don't remember, to be honest. I might have done, yeah. But back then I don't know. Because I used to follow Kickstarter and I used to be on their email list.
Okay, yeah.
But if it was an ad, it was you, presumably.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, campaigns like that, they always have multiple channels coming into them that, for their marketing. You don't get that big just overnight. Obviously, you need a good product to start with to get up to that level. But they're using all sorts of different types of marketing, not just ads as well, to generate that kind of revenue. They'll be using PR as well on top of that, and they obviously have a huge existing backer list that they can tap into. It's really common these days for companies who work in a specific sector to start launching multiple campaigns a year. So they'll they might work in the cycling industry, so they'll launch one product for bicycles 1 month, build a backer list for that, obviously, and then they can re-tap into those backers, to promote their second campaign. And it means that when you start getting into the third, fourth, fifth campaign, as long as your products are still good quality and as long as they're different from what you initially started with, these companies are able to improve their return on investment tenfold with each campaign, because they literally just go back to the backers from the last campaign each time. And then that existing success in the first few days, like I was saying, then promotes them and they end up on the front page of Kickstarter, and they pick up a load of new backers, which they can then use for the next campaign. And it's like a beautiful little cycle when you can get into it. It is just, a lot of people use that system for making money on Kickstarter.
With Betterback, at what stage did they come to you? Were they ready to go, or was it an early stage?
So with Betterback, we came in on their second campaign. So because it was their second campaign, they came to us, I think, a few days after they'd launched. So they were just about to hit that lull where the initial, big email list they had and their past campaign backers that were picking up all the early birds were starting to drop off. I think they were basically looking to bolster that middle part of their campaign using our services.
And was it already successful when it had done the, at that beginning stage? Yeah,
with campaigns like that, generally if they have existing success. I think their first campaign was almost as big as their second. It's much easier for them to get off the ground. When it comes to the smaller campaigns, that's when it starts to get really interesting with, how you then start to generate sales on a campaign, because, they don't have the existing resources. They don't necessarily have the funding, and they don't have the existing backer list to be able to tap into. So you generally find a lot more creativity with the marketing when it comes to those campaigns, because they have to get, as you do with Facebook ads, you can create a normal Facebook ad and it'll do fine. But if you want an ad that really performs well, you need to think a little bit outside of the box to generate that, that engagement on the ad, to get your cost per clicks down. So it's similar with the way they market.
If there was one thing you wanted to tell people not to do in a crowdfunding campaign, could you think of something?
So, I mean, the best thing not to do is underestimate it. That as soon as you think you've done enough work, then you're setting yourself up to fail. Because the amount of campaigns we get that come to us and they say, oh yeah, no, we've got pre-launch all sorted. We've got our email list. It's 200 people. And then I asked them, okay, so what kind of conversion rate do you think you're going to get from that? And yeah, it's, lots of people underestimate the amount of work you have to put into it. And yeah, it's probably the biggest cause of failed campaigns is launching without enough to get you up to a decent level.
I mean, the good thing though about putting all that work in is you're effectively getting a secondary benefit of promoting the product generally. So all the effort, all the money, all the ads you run and all the noise you make and anything else you do like PR is going to help just raise the profile of the product anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, particularly with pre-launch, it really helps to get the name of the brand out there as well. And what a lot of people do is they almost self-brand the companies. So they'll put the founder of the company at the forefront of any emails that are being sent out. Because with Kickstarter, you really want to try and create a personal relationship with the people who are backing. You don't necessarily want to try and build trust in the company because it's difficult to build trust in a company that hasn't existed up until a few months ago. Whereas a person, it's much easier and much quicker to build a personal relationship with people.
Oh, that's interesting. So this is, hey, it's Steve here, hey, it's Sarah here, whatever it might be. And that's because like if we like the way you're speaking to us, then we start to trust you. Whereas, just this is the whatever company. It's a lot harder work, particularly as you say, company hasn't really got any kind of profile. So, okay, that's fascinating. And if people want to find out more about CrowdReach, where should they go?
CrowdReach.co, the website is probably the best place. It's got everything we do is up there. See all our past campaigns on there. And yeah, want to learn a bit more about crowdfunding, we're always happy to talk to people. So just drop us a message through the contact form.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Will.
No problem.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Ideas Lab podcast. Please do subscribe, and if you've enjoyed this episode, it would be great if you could leave us a review. You can get links and details of everything mentioned in the podcast in the show notes, along with photos and video clips from many of our episodes. Just go to theideaslab.org/podcast.